process of digestion did we study the other day? Show me what have we done. Q? You are new, huh? Why were you absent? You go for all the marriages and the birthdays, then what can be done? Methods for steps for digestion, is it over? Kya jejunum has done? No, process all over. Yes, all over. Process is over. That is the process of digestion. The other day we studied. What did we study was how is food digested all over the element written up. Check your notebook. You have written all the steps. All the process steps. How many steps of digestion I asked you to write? 9 steps of digestion, which will summarize the process of breakdown of the carbohydrate, proteins, and fats all over. Check the digestive steps, all of you, as I speak now. Check whether you have written all the 9 steps. The first step would be what? In the mouth, where the starch is getting broken down to maltose with the help of salivary amylase. Second step is in the stomach, where the proteins would get broken down to form peptones and proteoses, peptides, peptones, and with the help of enzyme pepsin. Third step is in the small intestine, that is in the first part of the small intestine, where the emulsification of fat will happen, fat broken down with the help of bile salts. The fats are broken down with the help of bile salts, and what do we get? Smaller molecules of fats. The fourth step, what did you write in the small intestine? The starch again broken down with the help of pancreatic amylase to maltose. Fifth step you have written the peptides and the peptones again broken down by trypsin to smaller peptides. The sixth you have written is the smaller molecules of fats again broken down by pancreatic lipase to simple fat molecules. Yes? The seventh step was maltose getting broken down to glucose galactose by maltase. Sucrose getting broken down to glucose fructose by sucrase. And lactose getting broken down to glucose and galactose by lactase. Correct? Eighth step was peptides getting broken down by intestinal peptidase to amino acids. The last step was simple fat molecules broken down by intestinal lipase to fatty acids and glycerin. Did you write all the 9 steps? Aaya samajh mein? Now, if you check which are the steps you will have to write for your answer if you get a question. Explain protein digestion. देखो वहां से कौन-कौन से स्टेप पे explanation करना है. Which are the steps you get in your paper? Explain protein digestion. Which are the steps? 2, 5 and mark करो. Which are the steps for protein digestion? 2, 5 and 8 and check what numbers you have written. I don't know.
Small peptides.
Small peptides to amino acids. So protein digestion के कौन-कौन से steps है? Now you find out which are the steps. 2, 5, 8. Question comes for 3 marks. Explain the process of protein digestion. अभी वही 3 step पे explanation करना है. Question comes. Explain the process of carbohydrate digestion. Then 1 step in the mouth. 1 step in the first part of the small intestine, that is the duodenum, and the other last step is where the glucose and the galactose and all these things getting formed. Clear hai?
One second step
Carbohydrate. If it is carbohydrate, the first would be with salivary amylase.
When starch getting converted to
The second step would be with pancreatic amylase. And the third step are three steps together. Three: maltose, maltase, lactase and sucrase. Three. So those enzymes. So ऐसे करके answer अभी frame का I have given you together. The entire process of digestion of carbohydrates, fats and proteins I have given you together. But exam में कभी भी तीनों एक साथ कभी नहीं आता. Explain the process of all the three nutrients कभी नहीं आएगा. Either you will get proteins or fats or carbohydrates. So now you have to remember those three steps in a sequence. So name two regions of the alimentary canal where digestion does not take place. Esophagus and large intestine. What are the two functions of small intestine we studied? Completes the process of digestion and carries out absorption. For the process of absorption, what are the special structures in the small intestine known as villi? What are two special features of the villi we had learned which brings about the process of absorption? Two special features of the villi क्या है? You miss out one class, you will miss out the link. In the month of May, let me tell you children, in the month of May you go out for a holiday 1 week. जब आओगे कुछ समझ में नहीं आने वाला है. So ask your parents to please hold on for the holidays at least for a year. एक साल थोड़ा सा holiday कम करके पढ़ाई ज्यादा करो. Because you have spent enough amount of money, time both. I talk straight, खराब लगे, अच्छा लगे. So see that you spend more time here. It should be worth. यहाँ पे admission लेके अगर मनाली घूमने जाओगे एंड इधर उधर घूमने जाओगे then after मनाली के बाद जब इधर आओगे you will be lost. Physics, chemistry and let me tell you May का scene क्या है, you all of you are aware, no? हाँ, बहुत मजा आता है उसमें. So morning you'll have to come here. Morning 7:30 your lecture would start. नींद खुलेगी. हाँ, नींद खुलेगी ना. What time is your school? 8 o'clock. यहाँ पे 7:30 को पहुंच जाना है. Okay? कौन गिरा? हाँ, 7:30 को यहाँ पे पहुंच जाना है and with all your eyes wide, ears wide open, sense organs full functional state में आना है. Let me tell you again because we are facing this every year. इसमें भी 4 बच्चे रहेंगे जो जैसे मैंने बोला बाली, दुबई, मनाली ऑलरेडी प्लान हो चुका है. So after the holidays you all will suffer. बहुत सारा portion in the month of May we will rush and the objective is that we have to finish portion much ahead of time so that you get enough time to read, study, find out doubt, interact with us, do better in your school exam. यही objective है ना why you are coming here. So that objective has to be fulfilled. So जो पोर्शन अभी अब तक जो पोर्शन हो गया है डोंट वेट फॉर द एग्जाम. टाइम टेबल आएगा तो ही ओपन, तब कोई मतलब नहीं रहेगा व्हाई यू आर कमिंग हियर. व्हाट पोर्शन इज गोइंग ऑन. इसका नोटबुक का ये हालत क्यों है? व्हाट इज दैट? पहले बोला था चेंज कर. Now when we are talking about the portions, again I repeat, please go through so that every day when I come here, this is the 4th or the 5th lecture with you. 4th 5th ऐसा ही कुछ होगा. अब तक किसी का कोई डाउट नहीं है. This is the 5th lecture में. हाँ, तो इसीलिए तो मैं बोल रही हूँ प्लीज बुक खोलो, ऑस्पिशियस टाइम देखो, मम्मी को पूछो कब अच्छा मुहूर्त है एंड प्लीज बुक खोलो. डोंट वेट अगेन कि प्री बोर्ड्स का आएगा टाइम टेबल, टर्म का एग्जाम का टाइम टेबल आएगा देन यू ओपन. तब अच्छा रिजल्ट कैसे हो पाएगा? यू हैव टू स्टार्ट रीडिंग नाउ. So now when we are talking about the process of digestion, we have discussed about what are the steps of digestion. Now tell me what are the simplest form of carbohydrate digestion. What is the simplest form of carbohydrate digestion? What will you write? Glucose. What is the simplest form of protein digestion? amino acids, and simplest form of fat digestion is fatty acids and glycerol. Fatty acids and glycerol. Glycerol also you can write. Fatty acids also you can write, and glycerol also you can write. I asked you just now what are the main name two parts of the alimentary canal where digestion does not take place. Your answer is esophagus and large intestine. Special features of the villi, I asked you what are the special features of villi because of which absorption can take place. What are the special features of the villi?
Increasing the surface area.
To increase the surface area. Yes, so that the process of absorption can happen. How are the villi designed? All these answers we have written down. How are the villi designed to bring about absorption? उसमें क्या लिखना है? How are the
thin layer of
very thin wall made up of only one single layer of epithelial cells? And number two,
They are
richly supplied with blood vessels. सारे notes मैंने दिया हुआ है. Please go through. Please go through. Okay, so now this is what we had studied, and the last part would be absorption. What is absorption? The other day, did we write down the definition of absorption? What is meant by absorption? The diffusion of substances. The diffusion of substances. Meaning, we had already been talking about a concept known as the digestion is over, and after the process of digestion over, if we have to understand that what is absorption, talking about the entire ileum. What is the feature? I talk about the entire ileum, where we know that the inner wall of the ileum is extensively folded. The inner wall of the ileum is extensively folded like this. After the process of digestion, in this central cavity, ये जो central cavity of the ileum, I am talking about the last part of the small intestine ileum. After the process of digestion, in this central cavity, there are three major types of molecules. What are those three major types of molecules? I understand. Glucose, what else? Amino acids, and fatty acids and glycerol. So say suppose I am talking about three types of molecules here. Just now I asked you what are the simplest form of carbohydrate digestion, glucose. What are the simplest form of fat digestion? I would write fatty acids. And what are the simplest form of protein digestion? Amino acids. So what is their fate now? These three types of molecules, digestion is all over in the small intestine now, no more breakdown can happen. Large intestine does not carry out any step of digestion. So now what is the fate of these three types of molecules? What is the fate? They have to enter into the wall of the villi. They have to move through the wall of the villi, move through the wall of the villi and go away. So if I try understanding that, talk about this one single villus. What did we, the other day I showed you some structures also. I talk about one single villus. This entire wall of the villus is made up of what? A single layer of epithelial cell. Just one single layer of epithelial cells. So since it is made up of only one single layer of epithelial cell, the wall of the villi is so thin. And now inside what is there? Inside would be a large number of blood vessels. Say suppose I talk about a network of blood vessels here. Inside the villus there is a network of blood vessel, and this network of blood vessel will carry out the process of absorption. How? Just now like this I showed that these molecules are outside, where this is the inner space of the ileum that I am talking about. Outside every single villus, such type of molecules are in large number, high concentration. So I am talking about three types of molecules are here, just exactly what I had shown you in that lumen there. So now what is happening? I want to understand what is absorption. Digestion के बाद all these three types of molecules are there, the glucose and amino acids, fatty acids and glycerol. These molecules will directly cross the membrane and come in contact with the blood vessels. Now they are getting dissolved in the blood vessels. And that will happen for all of them. These molecules of fatty acids, say suppose now I talk about these molecules of fatty acids, they will just cross the wall. How can they cross the wall? Because the wall is so thin. Diffusion is possible. And why diffusion? Because in the blood, all these molecules, the fatty acid, the glucose, and the amino acids are in a lesser concentration. Outside the villi, they are in a higher concentration, so smooth diffusion can take place. Here, concentration of these molecules more, in the blood, concentration of molecules less, so the molecules are easily passing through the membrane, entering into the blood. And that is applicable for all the molecules. All these molecules, constantly they are crossing the membrane and entering into the blood. Crossing the membrane, entering into the blood. What is this process known as? If I talk about this process which is happening, what is this process known as? Absorption. Can I say absorption is nothing but diffusion actually? Yes, absorption is nothing but diffusion where the molecules of fatty acids, amino acids and glucose are constantly moving from the cavity of the ileum, crossing the membrane of the villus and come in contact with the blood stream. Because already we had learned two special features of the villus. One is this one, thin membrane, and two is the rich supply of the blood vessels. So this is absorption. Now next one. Absorption, after absorption is done, so now these blood vessels that they are moving out from the villi, they are having all these different type of molecules in large concentrations now. They are already having the glucose and the amino acids and the fatty acids in large amount, and they have been carried by the blood to long distances. What is this process known as? This process is known as assimilation. After the process of digestion is over, the ileum, the inner cavity of the ileum is loaded with the simplest form of carbohydrate, proteins and fats. That is the glucose, fatty acids and the amino acids. Will they further break down? No. Now they will get absorbed. What is the meaning? Simple diffusion. And now the blood of the villus is getting loaded with these molecules. The blood of the villus get loaded with these molecules. The blood will carry this and deposit in the body cells. This process of distribution of the simplest form of food is what is known as assimilation. So we had studied digestion majorly. We had studied digestion. We had studied after digestion, absorption. We had studied assimilation. And now if I start thinking about the mouth cavity, the process of taking in our food, what is that known as? Ingestion. And back in the large intestine, the waste substances which are formed and the release of the waste substances, that is known as egestion, not excretion. Excretion is by the way of the kidneys. That is known as egestion. Okay. Commonly in the lower standards, we have studied the release of the waste substances. All can be considered as excretion, but now that you are studying higher standards, excretion and egestion are two different words. So what is the entire summary? I would write entire summary. First is egestion in the mouth, taking in of food. After ingestion, now next what? Process of digestion, which is happening in which three parts of the alimentary canal? The mouth, the stomach, the small intestine. So after ingestion, we talk about the process known as digestion. After digestion, we talk about the process known as absorption. After absorption, what? Assimilation. And what is the last step that takes place in the large intestine? This is known as egestion. This is known as egestion. Clear? So study the entire process of breakdown of the complex food to simpler forms. This is the summary, the 5 major steps that we talk about. Clear? Now, let us write down one difference between this, digestion and absorption. This you are asked, digestion and absorption. Take one question. Differentiate between digestion and absorption. You can make a column and write straight away. Digestion and absorption. Prasad, ये एकदम ये है. मुझे एक अच्छा black pen देना. Okay, digestion and absorption. Write down. Digestion. For digestion, right? The breakdown of digestion. For digestion, make columns. Digestion and absorption. For digestion, right? The breakdown of complex nutrients. ये बहुत लाइट दिखा है हाँ AC. Breakdown of complex nutrients to their simpler forms. I'll put it on again after some. Breakdown of complex nutrients to their simpler forms with the help of enzymes. Breakdown of complex nutrients to their simpler forms with the help of enzymes is known as digestion. Absorption, other side. The diffusion of simpler nutrients. Diffusion of simpler nutrients. That is glucose, amino acids, and fatty acids. Glucose, amino acids, and fatty acids. Glucose, amino acids, and fatty acids from the cavity of the small intestine. From the cavity of the small intestine. From the cavity of small intestine towards the blood vessels. Towards the blood vessels. Small intestine towards blood vessels is known as absorption. Towards blood vessels is known as absorption. Towards blood vessels is known as absorption. Next, define assimilation. Define assimilation. Next question. Check the spellings as you write. Define assimilation. All these words you should know, then you'll be able to answer other questions. Define assimilation, right? The distribution of digested nutrients by the way of blood. Distribution of digested nutrients by the way of blood to by the way of blood distribution of digested nutrients by the way of blood to all the body cells for further breakdown, for further breakdown is known as assimilation. For further breakdown is known as assimilation.
Water breakdown into energy.
Correct.
Into energy.
Energy लिखो अभी naming में से भी होगा. For further breakdown is known as assimilation. If you write, it's not wrong, but no need for assimilation. For further breakdown is known as assimilation. So we are going to study now. क्या हो गया? क्यों इसमें recordings नहीं हो रहा? Now, next that we are going to study would be what? Now, what is the phase? Just now, what did you write? Assimilation. What did you write there? These nutrients have to enter where the body cells for further breakdown. Meaning, when I talk about that, the glucose now has to break down into some other components. Meaning what? The glucose has to break down to release energy. So I would write that the glucose getting broken down to release energy. How? This molecule of glucose, how can it break down? Basically, for the breakdown of glucose, it requires oxygen. A cell having large amount of oxygen, glucose breakdown is much faster. So remember, we are connecting the concept of digestion now to respiration. We are moving ahead with respiration. We are done with digestion. Now we are already finished discussing everything about digestion. Now I am starting with the concept of respiration. But linked here, digestion and respiration, these are not absolute two different processes in our body. Digestion के साथ respiration का link क्या है? Now that the body cells have got the glucose, this has to get broken down to what? Carbon dioxide, and then a small amount of water, and then a whole lot of energy. So I may say that this body cells, what did I tell you just now? In the body cells, by the way of blood, the body cells now get glucose. Why am I not talking about the fatty acids and the amino acids? Because the fatty acids and the amino acids will go to the liver, and they also will get either broken down to some form of carbohydrate, or they have got other functions. Right now we are only talking about release of energy. That is the next segment of the chapter, life processes, that is respiration. So to start with the concept of respiration and draw the connection of respiration with nutrition, here I say that now so far we were talking about glucose, the simplest form of carbohydrate digestion. And just now I said that by the process of assimilation, by the way of the blood, body cells are going to get the glucose. So now that the body cells get the glucose, what is the fate of this what is the fate of this glucose? The glucose will be broken down with the help of oxygen. Body cell में oxygen कहाँ से आएगा? By the way of breathing. By the way of breathing. So glucose is obtained. जैसे ही oxygen, inadequate amount the body cell gets. What are the products? The products are carbon dioxide and water and energy. This is what we are talking about as respiration. So far in the lower standards, you had always come across respiration meaning breathing, taking in oxygen, giving out carbon dioxide. But now that we talk about respiration, what is the actual meaning of respiration is oxygen we breathe in, fine. But ये जो oxygen body cells में when they will enter, they will break down glucose. And that is the job of the oxygen that we inhale. So glucose getting broken down with the help of oxygen to release carbon dioxide and energy. That is the meaning of respiration. So how do we define respiration? The biochemical process in which glucose is broken down with the help of oxygen to release carbon dioxide and energy. But this process, again, based on what type of organisms we are, will every organism have large amount of oxygen in the cell? No. I will talk about some organisms which will not. Okay, now can you tell me which is that cell organelle? Which is that cell organelle which releases energy? Mitochondria. So now for organisms like us, for organisms like the plants, what will happen? Mitochondria in the cells are so many. Oxygen will be taken in so many. So we will generally show this process. But will this be the same for all? No, for all no. For certain organisms like the bacteria, for certain organisms like the yeast, fungi, they don't have mitochondria, so definitely they will not have oxygen. They don't have any respiratory structures. So I'm saying that this oxygen that I'm showing you as a component, yes, 90% of the organisms has, but there are some 10-15% organisms which don't have oxygen in their cells. So should the glucose be broken down in some other pathway? Yes. The pathway of glucose breakdown is different from them, from us. So we are going to learn now what are the different pathways of glucose breakdown. But before that, we'll have to know what is the definition of respiration. Let us write. Write down the next head of the chapter, life processes, respiration. Respiration. Write down the next head of the chapter, respiration. And then write down the definition. What is the definition of respiration? Let us write. The biochemical process. Definition for respiration, write down. The biochemical process in which organic food, the biochemical process in which organic food, that is glucose, biochemical process in which organic food, that is glucose, is broken down. Glucose is broken down in the presence of oxygen. We will write in the presence of oxygen because this is majorly happening in all organisms. In the presence of oxygen to release carbon dioxide, and energy. To release carbon dioxide and energy. So now we are going to come across that this process, respiration, how it can be different in different group of organisms. First of all, if I talk about ourselves, animals, developed organisms, do we have structures for taking in oxygen from the environment? Do we have structures for taking in oxygen from the environment? Yes or no? Yes, we have the nostrils, and then we have the windpipe, the trachea, and so many other developed structures. Right now, with us, are there other organisms surviving? Hundreds and hundreds of bacteria surrounding us right now in this room. They are also in the same environment as we are, but are they able to take in oxygen? They are also in the same environment here with us, but they are not able to take in oxygen because they don't have any structures and methods for taking in oxygen from the environment. So their method of breakdown of glucose, can it be the same like us? Definitely not. I talk about some other organisms like the fungi. Can you give me one example? Fungi, fungus, mushrooms. What else? और कुछ पता है? Fungi example? हाँ, rhizopus, correct. All these are also organisms. हाँ? Mold. Bread के ऊपर जो एक layer बन जाता है if you keep the slices of bread, or if you cook the food and keep it outside. Now today mother cooks food and she forgets to keep it in the fridge. Tomorrow there'll be some foul smell. फिर भी रखो उसको बाहर ही रखो, फेंकना नहीं है. By the next day, in another 2 days, you will get to see some cottony outgrowth has developed there. Did you ever notice? So some cottony outgrowth ho jata hai and there is enough foul smell. So what are those outgrowth? What are those cottony structures that has developed? That is all fungus. Now, these are also organisms which does not have mitochondria in their cells like us. So the process of breakdown of the glucose is not this. So this is standard. We had written down the definition. But now let us try understanding what are some methods of glucose breakdown. Let us start with this. What are some methods of glucose breakdown? We are trying to study the concept of respiration. Glucose gets broken down to, first of all, a simpler compound, and that is known as the pyruvate, also known as the pyruvic acid. All of you will write this with me. Take in the horizontal part, book also you can take, or vertical you can arrange and write neat and nice. So what are we writing? Glucose getting broken up. What is glucose? Glucose is a 6-carbon sugar. No, always we write C6H12O6. So glucose is a 6-carbon sugar, and pyruvate or the pyruvic acid that I am talking about is a 3-carbon sugar. So glucose getting broken down to pyruvate or pyruvic acid. This is a standard process. Which takes place in all cells, all organisms. All cells, all organisms. What is this process? Where is this process taking place? Or what is this process known as? This process is known as glycolysis. Glycolysis. Lysis matlab breakdown. Lysis matlab breakdown. Lysis. Glycolysis matlab glucose ka breakdown. Glycolysis, where does this process take place? This process always takes place in the cytoplasm of all cells. Whether I talk about human, or I talk about a plant, or I talk about the mushroom, or I talk about any insect, everywhere ये process होता है. Whether I talk about a multicellular organism, or I talk about a unicellular organism, in every organism this process happens. So this is a process which will happen in all organisms. But now when I talk about that this process takes place in all organisms, now the fate of pyruvic acid. Now what about this pyruvic acid? First of all, the 6-carbon compound has broken down to 3. So one glucose molecule will always break down to 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. That is easily understood. Now, ये 6-carbon agar hai, and I am saying that this is a 3-carbon sugar, so definitely 2 molecules hai. But now, next part is that what will happen to this pyruvate? Will it break down the same way in all organisms? No. Based on which cell is having what feature, the product of pyruvate breakdown will differ. Let us see how. I talk about the first pathway. Now, in the first pathway, what? I am talking about the first pathway where I want to see pyruvate. How does it break down if the cell has abundance of oxygen? If the cell has abundance of oxygen, matlab something like us, when the cell or when the organism can take in enough amount of oxygen from the environment, plants can take in enough amount of oxygen from the environment. How would the plant take in oxygen from the environment? By the way of stomata. So I talk about any developed organism, the frog and the fish, the plants and the human, the small different type of insects also. They also have got pores in their body through which they can take in oxygen. So if it is an organism which can take in oxygen, abundance of oxygen they can take it, then what would be the breakdown products of pyruvic acid? The breakdown products of pyruvic acid would be carbon dioxide, water, and 38 molecules of ATP. Where is this process taking place? This process is taking place inside the mitochondria. Where is this process taking place? Inside the cell organelle known as mitochondria. So this process of breakdown of the pyruvic acid to carbon dioxide, water and 38 molecules of ATP, which is taking place in the mitochondria, this process is known as Krebs cycle. This process is known as Krebs cycle. You have to know only the names. Detailed process syllabus में नहीं है. So you don't worry about the steps. Sirf this basic format you'll have to remember. The breakdown of what is glycolysis. What will you write? What is meant by glycolysis? Breakdown of glucose to pyruvic acid, which takes place in the cytoplasm of all cells. This process will happen in all organisms, remember, whether it is a single celled organism, multicellular organism, simple hai, complex hai, fungus hai, or a plant hai, animal hai, everywhere. This process is a common feature, common step hai. But pyruvate now, based on what the condition. So I'm talking about cells which has got mitochondria, organisms which can take in oxygen, organisms which have enough oxygen, उन्हीं सारे cells में ये process होगा. So what is this process known as? This process is known as aerobic respiration. Try to understand. After that, we'll have to write down the differences. What is aerobic respiration then? Breakdown of glucose to carbon dioxide, water and energy. Did I write down this equation? This is the skeletal equation that we had written down. So now this is the breakup that I'm talking about. So breakdown of glucose to carbon dioxide, water, energy. What is it called? Aerobic respiration. What are some examples of organisms belonging to this category? Birds, reptiles, human, insects, plants, all are these type of organisms. What is the next category? Let us see. The next category is what would happen if there is deficiency of oxygen? What will happen if there's a deficiency of oxygen? In certain cells, there is a lack of oxygen. There's a deficiency of oxygen or there's a lack of oxygen. So which type of examples we are talking about? Let us talk about some examples like the muscle cells of our body. Muscle cells of our body. Yes, sometimes, and this is a temporary phase, remember, that I'm talking about. This is a temporary phase where I understand that sometimes when in our muscle cells there is deficiency of oxygen, lack of oxygen, then what would happen? Did you ever come across muscle cramps while walking long distances or running? Whenever we walk long distances or run, or whenever we are engaged in some vigorous muscular activity, we suffer from muscular pain. And if little bit more vigorous, we may suffer from muscular twitches or cramps. So why cramps happen? Cramps happen when our muscle cells suffer from lack of oxygen. Oxygen deficiency जब हो जाती है. But कैसे होगा oxygen deficiency? Because the muscle contraction is faster than our rate of breathing. Now that you are writing now that I am talking now, I am walking very nice and slow. अभी muscular cramps होने का chances है? नहीं, क्योंकि the rate of contraction and the rate of breathing is more or less at par. जितना oxygen contraction में जा रहा है, use हो रहा है, and whatever amount of oxygen I am breathing is more or less at par. तो कुछ problem नहीं है. But when the body muscles contract at a faster rate and rate of breathing or oxygen intake कम हो जाता है, that's the time when muscle starts aching. That's the time when muscle starts aching. Did you ever realize whenever you are walking fast or running, your breathing rate increases? Breathing rate increase होता है कि नहीं होता है? या stand same रहता है? breathing rate always increase होता है. You are cycling, breathing rate continuously increase हो रहा है. क्यों? Because rate of contraction of the muscle is faster. Your body needs more oxygen. That's the reason हमारा breathing rate much faster होने लग जाता है. So when the muscle contraction is much faster, which results in the deficiency of oxygen in the muscles, at that time, what are the products formed? At that time, the products formed are lactic acid and 2 molecules of ATP. Lactic acid and 2 molecules of ATP, and accumulation of lactic acid is what is responsible for muscle fatigue or muscular cramps. Accumulation of lactic acid is what is responsible for muscular cramps or muscle fatigue. Muscle fatigue. What is the meaning of fatigue? Tiredness. Muscle fatigue matlab muscular tiredness. So when would the cells of our body start releasing lactic acid? When there's a deficiency of oxygen. Can you write one instance when such type of a situation happens? When we are running, jogging, cycling, playing, etc. When vigorous muscular activity हो रहा है. What is the third condition? Now let us write. The third condition is when there is complete absence of oxygen. When there is complete absence of oxygen. What is the meaning? Complete absence. It is not a temporary phase, it is a permanent phase. These cells never get adequate oxygen. They never get oxygen. Just now, as I mentioned, surrounding right now our body, there are hundreds of bacteria in the same environment as we are. We are able to take in oxygen, they are not, because they don't have any structures for taking in oxygen in their cells, in their body. So now, absence of oxygen. So now if I'm talking about absence of oxygen, which examples? Let me just write it up. The third is, I'm talking about absence of oxygen. So if I talk about absence of oxygen, which examples? Examples would be some bacteria to think about. Example would be some fungus, unicellular organisms like the yeast to think about. So they have absolute absence. That is not a temporary phase that now they don't have, after some time they may get. No, absolutely no oxygen. Then what would be the products? Then the products would be 2 molecules of ethyl alcohol, also known as ethanol. 2 molecules of ethyl alcohol or ethanol, and then 2 molecules of water, 2 molecules of ATP. Look into the difference now that we are talking about. Here, this was a process where the glucose is completely broken down. Why? Because the cells have oxygen. Because the cells have mitochondria. The process is very, very efficient. From 1 molecule of glucose, we get how many molecules of energy? 38 molecules of energy we get. Same, from 1 molecule of glucose, what about these organisms? They get only 2 molecules of ATP. What is the full form of ATP? Adenosine triphosphate. So from 1 molecule of glucose, if it is a yeast or a bacterial cell, they get only 2 molecules of ATP. But definitely the yeast and the bacteria, they are much simpler than our organization. Our body organization बहुत complex है. Now that you are writing, now that I am talking, now only so much of energy requirement is there, right? So our cells require so much of energy. Every now and then the energy demand is so high. But what about these organisms? No, they are not even moving much. The process of movement and the functions are so simple. So definitely they can easily manage with the 2 molecules of ATP per molecule of glucose. What is this process known as? This process is known as anaerobic respiration. So what? Yes. Muscular cramps, yeah, fatigue. F-A-T-I-G-U-E. Fatigue matlab tiredness, muscular tiredness. So what are the 2 major types we are studying right now? We are saying one is aerobic respiration. What is the meaning you understood? If it is aerobic respiration, glucose is broken down to what are the products? Carbon dioxide, water, and 38 molecules of ATP. And if it is anaerobic respiration, glucose is broken down to what? Ethyl alcohol, water, and 2 molecules of ATP. Name the prominent product during anaerobic respiration. ये लिखना है, prominent product ये है, ethyl alcohol. That is the prominent product. That is the reason this process of breakdown of glucose in the yeast, in the bacteria, this process is also known as fermentation or alcoholic fermentation. Do you know what is fermentation? Did you ever come across this word fermentation? Fermentation कभी नहीं?
While making
Soda. हाँ, कहाँ पे और example day to day life at home?
and while making naan.
While making
Naan.
naan or else idli, dosa, dahi. हाँ. Everywhere we are fermentation means what? You allow this wine. What is happening in all these processes? What is happening? We are allowing some carbohydrate food to remain for a particular period of time so that they release carbon dioxide along with that alcohol, some form of alcohol. Now when you heat them, carbon dioxide will be released. So what is the process of fermentation? Yes, fermentation happens in our homes, day-to-day life. When we talk about the batter of the idli and the dosa, there is fermentation going on, curd fermentation going on. In the processing industries, when we talk about the making of the different type of beverages, fermentation going on. In the making of the bread, in the making of the bun and the bread and the pastries, yes, fermentation going on. So fermentation is a process where we are talking about breakdown of glucose in this method. What is this method known as? Since alcohol is a prominent product, what is this method also known as? Alcoholic fermentation. Okay, so is alcoholic fermentation an anaerobic method or the aerobic method? Anaerobic method. So now you tell me, what are the two major differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration? Two major differences क्या लिखना है? Nobody will write. You first think and tell me. After that, I'll ask you to write. What are the two major differences, aerobic and anaerobic respiration?
Presence of O2 and absence of O2.
In anaerobic respiration, oxygen is not involved. Aerobic respiration में oxygen is involved in the breakdown of glucose. Second difference बोलो. देखो, complete देखो and then tell me.
Ma'am,
In aerobic, girls, keep answering and interact so that you learn here. Aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration, apart from oxygen, और क्या differences दिखाई दे रहा है? Energy released in anaerobic respiration is? Anaerobic is 2 molecules of ATP per molecule of glucose. Aerobic में 38 molecules of ATP per molecule of glucose. Number 3.
Ma'am, in the aerobic one, it happens in the multicellular organism.
When the cells will have large number of mitochondria.
And it happens in the single
जिसमें
cellular
mitochondria either absent है और very few है. Then the cells will always go for anaerobic respiration. What is anaerobic respiration also known as? What is the alternative name for anaerobic respiration? Alcoholic fermentation. And what is aerobic respiration also known as? Krebs cycle. Where does Krebs cycle take place? Inside the mitochondria. Clear hai? Now we will write the difference between these two. Take down in your notebook. Make a table, difference between, put the head down, respiration, we had already started with this. Now this question, as it is, you get for 3 marks in your paper. Explain the pathways of glucose breakdown. The question that you will get here, where this entire thing is your answer. What is the question you get? Explain the steps of glucose breakdown. Explain the process or the steps of glucose breakdown, where all these 3 steps you have to write. And this is a 3-mark question. Explain the steps of glucose breakdown. ये flow chart लिखना है and then little bit of description. So for you, 3 mark answer means flow chart के साथ you will have to write down some description also. Okay. So let us write down difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Homework nahi hai. This is the answer for this question. This question you get in your paper for 3 marks. तब यही चीज explain करना है with the flow chart. So right now you write down difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. देखो. Difference between aerobic is complete in 2 minutes. Aerobic and anaerobic respiration table. Under aerobic you write breakdown of glucose. Under aerobic you write breakdown of glucose takes place. Breakdown of glucose takes place in the presence of oxygen. Breakdown of glucose takes place in the presence of oxygen. Other side, anaerobic. Breakdown of glucose takes place in the absence of oxygen. आंसर में ग्लूकोज ब्रेकडाउन लिखना जरूरी है. डोंट राइट absence of oxygen and presence of oxygen. Absence of oxygen with what reference? Breakdown of glucose takes place in the absence of oxygen. Anaerobic. Number 2. For aerobic, prominent products are, ये लिखो 1, 2, 3. Prominent products are carbon dioxide, water and 38 ATP. Prominent products are carbon dioxide, water, 38 ATP. Other side,
ATP का सब कुछ का molecule होता है.
ATP is an energy molecule जो mitochondria से constantly release होते रहते हैं, which will again break down and get the job done in the cells. अरे 9th standard में सीखा है ना ये सब? हाँ सीखा था, याद है ना? भूल गए. माइटोकॉन्ड्रिया में छोटे छोटे फिंगर लाइक प्रोजेक्शंस होता है where all these ATP molecules are constantly formed. So what I said, prominent products. Other side, and anaerobic respiration में लिखो prominent products are ethanol, water and 2 molecules of ATP. कौन सा H? हाँ C2H5. अभी तुम ये लिखो, name of the compound लिखो, compound by word लिखो. Prominent products are ethanol, water and 2 molecules of ATP. Ethanol, water and 2 molecules of ATP. आया समझ में? Third, one more point we'll have to write. One more point. Aerobic takes place in cells having large number of mitochondria. Takes place in cells having large number of mitochondria. Takes place in cells having large number of mitochondria. Example, plant, animal cells. Other side, anaerobic में लिखो. Takes place in cells. Takes place in cells where oxygen is absent and lack mitochondria. Oxygen is absent, lack mitochondria, full stop. Example, yeast bacteria. Example, yeast bacteria. One question for homework. This 3 differences done. One question for homework. Write down. Try answering on your own. The next class will start with this. When does muscular cramps occur? When does muscular cramps occur? When does muscular cramps occur? Full stop. how can the situation be revived? How can the situation be revived? This type of a concept in your question paper you will get in the form of a case study. एक बड़ा सा question रहेगा. Answers are very simple. But I just gave you in a form of a simple question. What is meant by when does muscular cramps take place? How can this be revived? Okay. लिखने की कोशिश करो. The next class will start from here.
क्या समझा? क्या समझा? क्लास में चूज
as PD, which are the